My name is Amber. I am 34 years old, and I still remember the exact moment my world shattered into pieces. It was a regular Friday afternoon when my phone rang. My husband of 10 years was on the other end laughing. He said he was divorcing me and had already sold our house. He laughed like it was the funniest joke he ever told. But what he did not know was that I had been preparing for this moment, and the documents in my hands would wipe that smile off his face forever. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you believe in standing up for yourself, hit that like button and subscribe to join our community. This story will show you exactly what happens when a woman who has been underestimated decides to fight back. Let me take you back to where it all began 12 years ago in Columbus, Ohio. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, with my accounting degree still feeling new in my hands. I had landed a position at a small auditing firm downtown. Nothing glamorous, but it was honest work, and I was proud of myself. Every morning I would wake up at 6, put on my best professional outfit, and take the bus to the office. I was determined to build a career to prove to myself and everyone else that I could make something of my life. That autumn, my company sent me to a networking event for young finance professionals. The room was filled with people in expensive suits, holding wine glasses and exchanging business cards. I felt out of place standing near the appetizer table, trying to look like I belonged. That is when I noticed him across the room. Derek was 24 tall, with dark hair and confident posture. He worked at a financial services company and had that ambitious spark in his eyes that made you believe he was going somewhere in life. He walked over to me with an easy smile and introduced himself. We talked for hours that night, long after the event officially ended. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Unlike other men I had met, he asked about my career goals, my dreams for the future. He made me feel seen in a way I had never experienced before. Our first dates were simple but meaningful. We would meet at a small coffee shop near my apartment, talking until they closed. We took long walks through the park, sharing our hopes and fears. Derek told me about his plans to climb the corporate ladder to build a life of security and comfort. He spoke about wanting a partner who would grow with him, someone who understood the value of hard work. I believed every word he said. After 2 years of dating, Derek proposed. It was not an elaborate gesture, just a quiet dinner at our favorite restaurant and a ring that sparkled under the candlelight. I said yes, without hesitation. My mother Sandra was there when I called to share the news. She was happy for me, though I could hear a hint of caution in her voice. She had always been protective, always worried that I gave too much of myself to others. But she trusted me to make my own decisions. Our wedding was small, but beautiful. We could not afford anything extravagant, so we kept it intimate. Family and close friends gathered in a local church, followed by a reception at a modest venue. My grandmother, who had always been my biggest supporter, pulled me aside during the celebration. She pressed an envelope into my hands and told me it was my inheritance from her, a gift to start my new life. She said to keep it safe, that I might need it someday. I thanked her with tears in my eyes, not fully understanding the wisdom in her words. Derek and I rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood. Those early years were filled with hope and possibility. We would cook dinner together, plan our future dream about the home we would one day own. I worked hard at my job, earning promotions and recognition. Life felt like it was moving in the right direction. 3 years into our marriage, everything changed. Derek received a significant promotion, but it required relocating to another city. He was excited already, talking about the opportunities this would bring. When he asked me to come with him to leave my job and start over in a new place, I hesitated. My career was finally taking off. I had worked so hard to get where I was. But Derek was persuasive. He promised that I could find a new job once we settled in, that this move would be good for both of us. He painted pictures of our future, a bigger house, financial stability, maybe even children someday. I loved him, and I believed in our partnership. So I submitted my resignation, said goodbye to my colleagues, and followed my husband to a new city. The first few months after the move were challenging. I applied for jobs, but found the market more competitive than I expected. Derek suggested that maybe I should take a break, focus on managing our household finances, while he established himself at the new company. It would be temporary, he assured me. Once things settled down, I could go back to work. Weeks turned into months, and months stretched into years. Somehow my temporary break became permanent. Derek's career flourished while mine faded into a distant memory. I became the one who handled the bills, organized our lives, made sure everything ran smoothly at home. I told myself this was teamwork, that we were building something together. I did not realize then that I was slowly disappearing. 5 years ago, Derek announced that it was time to buy a house. We had saved enough for a down payment, thanks to my careful budgeting. We found a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs, not too fancy, but perfect for us. It had a small backyard and a kitchen with big windows that let in the morning light. I fell in love with it immediately. When it came time to sign the paperwork, Derek handled everything. He said it was simpler that way, since he was the one with the official income. I did not think much of it. We were married partners in everything. What did it matter whose name was on the documents? I trusted him completely. I spent months decorating that house, choosing paint colors and furniture, turning empty rooms into a home filled with warmth. Every corner held a piece of my heart. I thought we would grow old there together, that those walls would witness the rest of our story. I had no idea how wrong I was. Around this time, Derek started working later than usual. He would come home after 9 or 10 at night, explaining that he had important projects with tight deadlines. I believed him because I had no reason not to. I would keep dinner warm and wait for him, happy to hear about his day when he finally walked through the door. But looking back now, I can see that the distance between us had already begun to grow. 2 years before that phone call destroyed everything. I started noticing small changes in Derek that I could not explain. At first, they seemed insignificant, easy to dismiss or rationalize away. But they accumulated like dust on a windowsill, impossible to ignore once you finally looked closely enough. Derek had always been attentive to his phone, but his behavior shifted into something different. He started keeping it face down on every surface, never leaving it unattended for even a moment. When he showered, the phone went with him into the bathroom. When he slept, it stayed under his pillow instead of on the nightstand. I asked him about it once, trying to sound casual, and he said he was expecting important work emails. The explanation made sense, so I accepted it. Then there were the late-night phone calls. His ringtone would sound at odd hours, and Derek would glance at the screen before stepping outside to answer. Through the window, I could see him pacing in our backyard, speaking in low tones I could not hear. When he came back inside, he would say it was just a colleague needing advice on a project. I wanted to believe him, so I did. Our dinners together changed too. We used to talk about everything, sharing stories from our days, discussing plans for weekends, laughing at silly things we had seen or heard. But gradually, silence crept in to fill the space between us. Derek would eat with his eyes fixed on his phone screen, scrolling through messages I was not allowed to see. When I tried to start conversations, his answers became shorter, more distracted. I told myself he was just stressed from work. One evening stands out sharply in my memory. Derek had gone to take a shower after dinner, and for once his phone remained on the kitchen table. I was clearing dishes when it buzzed with a notification. The screen lit up, and I saw a name I did not recognize. Megan. Next to her name was a small heart emoji. The preview showed part of her message, It said she missed him and could not wait until the weekend. My hands froze above the sink. Water ran over them suddenly cold as I stared at that screen. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind in the span of a few seconds. Who was Megan? Why was there a heart next to her name? What was happening this weekend that she was so eager for? When Derek emerged from the bathroom, I asked him directly. I kept my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. I said someone named Megan had texted him. He did not miss a beat. Without any hesitation, he explained that Megan was a new hire at his company. He had been assigned to mentor her, show her how things worked. The heart emoji was probably something she added herself, maybe just her personal style. He laughed it off, calling her young, and probably not aware of professional boundaries yet. His explanation was smooth, delivered with the confidence of someone telling the absolute truth. I wanted to believe my husband. The alternative was too painful to consider. So I swallowed my doubts and nodded, telling myself I was being paranoid. That night, I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The weeks that followed only deepened my unease. Derek started paying more attention to his appearance. He bought new clothes without mentioning it, upgraded his wardrobe from practical to stylish. His haircuts became more frequent every 2 weeks instead of once a month. He joined a gym and started working out in the mornings before heading to the office. When I commented on these changes, he said he needed to look more professional for client meetings. Then I discovered the credit card statements. I had always managed our household finances, so reviewing the bills was part of my routine. But new charges started appearing that made no sense. Expensive restaurants I had never heard of. A hotel charge for a Tuesday night, when Derek was supposedly at a work conference in the same city where we lived. Jewelry purchases that never appeared in our home. I gathered my courage and asked him about these expenses. Derek had an answer for everything. The restaurants were for entertaining important clients. The hotel was booked for a colleague visiting from out of town. The jewelry was a gift for his mother's birthday, already shipped directly to her. Each explanation came easily wrapped in just enough detail to sound believable. But something had shifted inside me. I started paying closer attention, watching for inconsistencies. I checked his work calendar online, cross-referencing it with the dates of those expensive dinners. There were no client meetings scheduled on those evenings. The hotel charge appeared on a date when no conferences were listed. Small lies began to stack up like bricks in a wall, separating us more each day. The scent gave him away more than anything else. Derek came home one night smelling of perfume that was not mine. It was sweet and floral, nothing like anything I owned. When I mentioned it, he said a female colleague had hugged him goodbye after a successful presentation. The explanation hung in the air between us, thin and unconvincing. I stopped sleeping well. My appetite faded. I found myself analyzing every word Derek said, searching for hidden meanings and half-truths. Our marriage had become a puzzle. I could not solve a mystery I was terrified to unravel. The man I had loved for over a decade suddenly felt like a stranger sharing my bed. Finally, I reached out to Rachel, my best friend from college. She had become a successful lawyer over the years, and we had stayed close despite the distance. I called her one evening when Derek was working late yet again. Through tears I had been holding back for months, I told her everything. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the perfume, the unexplained charges. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that changed everything. She told me that if I suspected something, I needed evidence. Not for confrontation, but for protection. She said she knew someone who could help, a private investigator named Linda, who was thorough and discreet. I hesitated at first. Hiring someone to follow my husband felt like a betrayal of its own kind. But Rachel reminded me that I deserved the truth, whatever it might be. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I could decide what to do next. That night, I saved Linda's number in my phone. It took me 3 more days to find the courage to call her. When I finally did, I felt like I was stepping off a cliff, not knowing whether I would fall or fly. But I was tired of living in uncertainty. I was ready to face whatever truth was waiting for me. Linda agreed to meet me at a coffee shop on the other side of town, somewhere I would not run into anyone I knew. She arrived exactly on time, a woman in her early 50s, with short grey hair and sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. She had spent 20 years as a police detective before starting her private investigation business, and her experience showed in the calm, methodical way she approached our conversation. I told her about my suspicions, laying out every detail I had gathered over the past months. Linda listened carefully, taking occasional notes in a small leather notebook. She did not judge me or offer false comfort. Instead, she asked practical questions about Derek's schedule, his workplace, his habits. By the end of our meeting, she had enough information to begin her investigation. We discussed her fees, which were higher than I expected, but manageable if I used some of my personal savings. I had kept the inheritance from my grandmother in a separate account all these years, never touching it except in emergencies. This felt like an emergency of a different kind, one that could determine the course of my entire future. Linda told me to prepare myself emotionally. Whatever she found the truth would not be easy to accept. She had seen marriages destroyed by suspicion alone, couples who could not recover even when no wrongdoing was discovered. But she had also seen people trapped in lies for years, unable to move forward, because they refused to see what was right in front of them. 2 weeks passed in agonizing slowness. I went through the motions of daily life. Cooking meals Derek barely touched. Cleaning rooms he hardly occupied. Waiting for a call that would either confirm my worst fears or set my mind at ease. Every time my phone rang, my heart stopped for a moment. Finally, Linda called and asked me to meet her again. Her voice gave nothing away, professional and neutral. I drove to the same coffee shop, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I arrived, she was already seated at a corner table, a thick manila envelope resting in front of her. She slid the envelope across the table without a word. I opened it with fingers that would not stop shaking. Inside were photographs, dozens of them printed in clear color. Derek and a young woman, their faces unmistakable even from a distance. Walking hand in hand into a restaurant. Kissing in a parking lot. Entering a hotel together in the evening. Leaving the same hotel the next morning, still wearing the clothes from the night before. The woman was attractive, probably in her late 20s, with long brown hair and a confident smile. In several photos, she was looking at Derek with an expression I recognized. It was the same way I used to look at him back when I believed he was everything I ever wanted. Linda identified her as Megan, 28 years old, working in the marketing department at Derek's company. According to what Linda had discovered, their relationship had begun 18 months ago during a business trip to Chicago. What started as a casual affair had developed into something more serious. They met regularly, sometimes at hotels, sometimes at her apartment when Derek claimed to be working late. I stared at the photographs until they blurred before my eyes. 18 months. For a year and a half, my husband had been living a double life. All those late nights, all those business trips, all those explanations I had accepted without question. Lies, every single one of them. Linda was not finished. She told me there was more, something I needed to hear, even though it would hurt. Derek had been consulting with a divorce lawyer for the past 3 months. He was planning to end our marriage, but on his terms in a way that would benefit him the most. His lawyer had advised him to position the divorce so that he would retain the majority of our assets, arguing that I had not contributed financially to our household. My stomach turned. Not only had Derek betrayed me with another woman, he was actively planning to leave me with nothing. All those years I had supported him, sacrificed my career, managed our home, and our finances meant nothing to him. In his mind, I was disposable, a burden to be shed as conveniently as possible. But the worst revelation was still to come. Linda leaned forward and lowered her voice. She told me that Derek had contacted a real estate agent. He was trying to sell our house, the home I had poured my heart into, without telling me anything about it. A potential buyer had already expressed interest. Derek was hoping to close the sale quickly, pocket the money, and present me with divorce papers before I even knew what was happening. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of his deception. This was not just infidelity. This was a calculated scheme to strip away everything I had built over the past decade. Derek had looked at our marriage, at our shared life, and decided to discard it like trash. And he had been laughing about it the whole time, confident that I was too trusting, too naive to see what was coming. Something shifted inside me in that moment. The hurt was still there, raw and overwhelming. But beneath it, a new feeling began to emerge. It was cold and steady, like steel being forged in fire. I was not going to let him win. I was not going to be the victim in his story. If Derek wanted a war, I would give him one he never saw coming. I thanked Linda for her work and asked if she could continue monitoring the situation. She agreed, promising to keep me updated on any developments with the house sale or Derek's lawyer. As I drove home that day, my mind was already racing ahead, forming the outline of a plan. The tears would come later in private moments when the weight of betrayal became too heavy to bear. But for now, I had work to do. The morning after meeting with Linda, I called Rachel and told her everything. She was furious on my behalf, her voice rising with indignation as I described Derek's schemes. When I finished, she immediately shifted into professional mode. She told me I needed my own lawyer, someone who specialized in divorce cases and knew how to protect my interests. Rachel gave me the name of Mr. Thompson, a senior partner at one of the most respected family law firms in the state. She said he was expensive, but worth every penny known for his meticulous approach and his track record of securing favorable outcomes for his clients. I called his office that same day and was fortunate to get an appointment for the following week. Mr. Thompson turned out to be a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. His office was lined with law books and framed certificates, the accumulated evidence of a long and successful career. He listened to my story with focused attention, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I showed him the evidence Linda had gathered, he studied each photograph carefully before setting them aside. Then he delivered the first piece of good news I had received in weeks. He told me that Derek's attempt to sell our house without my consent was not just wrong, it was illegal. In our state, any property acquired during marriage is considered marital property, regardless of whose name appears on the deed. Both spouses must agree to any sale. Derek had no legal right to sell that house without my signature. This meant that even if Derek found a buyer, the transaction could not be completed. Any attempt to proceed would constitute fraud. Mr. Thompson said we could use this as leverage in the divorce proceedings, evidence of Derek's bad faith and deceptive behavior. I felt a flicker of hope for the first time since this nightmare began. But Mr. Thompson was not finished. He asked me about our financial situation, wanting to understand the full picture before developing a strategy. I told him about our bank accounts, our debts, our assets. And then, as I was reviewing our records more carefully than I ever had before, I discovered something that changed everything. Derek had a secret bank account that I knew nothing about. It was not connected to any of our joint finances, hidden away, where he assumed I would never find it. I only stumbled upon it because I was looking through old tax documents, searching for anything that might help my case. There was a reference to an account number I did not recognize, deposits that did not match his official salary. With Mr. Thompson's guidance, I dug deeper. What I found made my blood run cold. Derek had been siphoning money from his company for years, creating fake invoices for services never rendered, approving payments to vendors that did not exist. The amounts were small enough to avoid detection individually, a few hundred here, 1,000 there. But over time, they had accumulated into hundreds of thousands of dollars. My husband was not just an unfaithful liar. He was an embezzler, a white-collar criminal who could face serious prison time if his employers discovered what he had been doing. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The man I had married, the man I had trusted with my life, was someone I never really knew at all. I made copies of everything, documenting each suspicious transactions with dates and amounts. Mr. Thompson secured the evidence properly, ensuring it would be admissible if needed. This was not just about protecting myself anymore. This was ammunition that could destroy Derek completely if he refused to cooperate. But there was another secret one that even Derek had overlooked. 3 years ago, we had nearly lost our house. Derek's spending had gotten out of control and we fell behind on our mortgage payments. The bank sent warning letters threatening foreclosure if we did not catch up immediately. Derek panicked, not knowing where to find the money. That was when I made a decision that would prove to be the smartest thing I ever did. Without telling Derek the full details, I used my inheritance from my grandmother to pay off the overdue amount and bring our mortgage current. But I did not stop there. Following my mother's advice, I spoke with the bank about restructuring the loan. Given that I was providing the funds to save the property, they agreed to add my name to the deed. Then, after reviewing our situation more carefully, I made another request. I asked the bank to transfer sole ownership of the house into my name. The bank manager was sympathetic, understanding that I was the one keeping the household financially stable. Since Derek had essentially abandoned his responsibilities, and I was the one paying to save the property, they processed the change. Derek never knew. He had no interest in paperwork or legal details. When documents arrived, he would sign whatever I put in front of him without reading a word. The transfer of ownership happened quietly, filed away in records he would never think to check. For 3 years, Derek had been living in a house that belonged entirely to me, completely unaware of this fact. When I told Mr. Thompson about this, he actually smiled for the first time since our meeting began. He said this was better than anything he could have hoped for. Derek had been trying to sell a property he did not own. He had contacted real estate agents, negotiated with potential buyers, all for a house that was legally mine. This was not just grounds for a favorable divorce settlement. This was fraud, another crime to add to his growing list. We spent hours developing a comprehensive strategy. Mr. Thompson organized everything into separate folders, each one representing a different weapon in our arsenal. The first folder contained evidence of Derek's affair with Megan, photographs and records that proved his infidelity beyond any doubt. The second folder held the documents proving my ownership of the house, with notarized copies of every relevant paper. The third folder contained the evidence of Derek's embezzlement from his company. Each folder was a door that could open onto disaster for Derek. Together, they represented the complete collapse of every lie he had built his life upon. Mr. Thompson assured me that with this evidence, we could secure a divorce on our terms. Derek would have no choice but to accept whatever conditions I set. I left the law office feeling something I had not felt in months. It was not quite happiness, but it was close. It was power. For the first time since discovering Derek's betrayal, I was not helpless. I was not the victim waiting to be discarded. I was a woman with a plan, and I was ready to execute it. The call came on a Friday afternoon, just as Linda had predicted it would. Derek liked to conduct his important business at the end of the week, giving himself the weekend to celebrate whatever victory he imagined he had achieved. I was sitting in the kitchen when my phone rang, his name appearing on the screen like a countdown to detonation. I answered calmly, keeping my voice neutral. Derek did not bother with pleasantries. He launched straight into his announcement, speaking with the confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. He told me we were getting divorced. He said it flatly, without emotion, like he was reading from a script he had rehearsed. Then he delivered what he thought was the killing blow. He said he had already sold the house, that a buyer was lined up and ready to close the deal. We would split whatever was left after the mortgage was paid off, and then I could find somewhere else to live. Perhaps with my mother, he suggested, since I clearly could not support myself. I heard Megan giggling in the background, her laughter carrying through the phone like nails on glass. Derek chuckled too, enjoying the moment, savoring what he believed was his ultimate triumph over the wife who had become an inconvenience. I let him finish. I did not interrupt, did not cry, did not beg. When he was done speaking, the silence stretched between us for several long seconds. I could tell he was waiting for some reaction, some sign that his words had wounded me as deeply as he intended. But I gave him nothing. Instead, I simply said that we should meet on Monday at my lawyer's office to sign the papers. My voice was steady, businesslike, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt. Derek seemed surprised by my composure, probably expecting tears and pleading the response he had imagined during all those months of planning. But he agreed quickly, clearly, eager to complete his plan before I had time to complicate things. That weekend was the longest of my life. I barely slept, going over every detail of what was coming. My mother called, sensing something was wrong, and I finally told her everything. She cried with me, then grew angry, then settled into the same cold determination I had found within myself. She told me to show him exactly who he had underestimated. Monday morning arrived grey and overcast, fitting weather for what was about to unfold. I dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that projected confidence and control. I wanted Derek to see that I was not the broken woman he expected to find. I arrived at Mr. Thompson's office early, reviewing the folders one final time. Everything was in place, organized with precision, that would have made my accounting professors proud. When Derek walked through the door, Megan trailing behind him like a trophy he wanted to display, I felt nothing but calm. Derek looked surprised to see me already seated, composed and waiting. He had brought Megan deliberately, I realized, wanting her to witness what he imagined would be my humiliation. She wore expensive clothes and a smug expression, glancing around the office like she was evaluating her future territory. Derek dropped into the chair across from me, already impatient. He said we should make this quick because he had other appointments. He pulled a stack of papers from his briefcase and slid them across the table. These were the divorce documents his lawyer had prepared, filled with terms that would leave me with virtually nothing. He pushed a pen toward me and waited, expecting me to sign without question, just as I had always done throughout our marriage. I looked at the papers, then at Derek, then at Megan. Their confidence was almost amusing given what they did not know. I did not touch the pen. Instead, I reached down and opened the briefcase at my feet, the one that held everything I had been preparing for weeks. Slowly, deliberately, I removed the first folder and placed it on the table. Derek's brow furrowed with confusion as I opened the folder and spread its contents before him. Photographs of him and Megan covered the table, image after image of their secret life together, walking arm in arm, kissing in parking lots, entering and leaving hotels. The documentation was thorough, leaving no room for denial or explanation. The color drained from Derek's face as he stared at the evidence. Megan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Neither of them had expected this. Neither of them had imagined that I might have been watching gathering ammunition while they believed I was oblivious. Mr. Thompson spoke for the first time, his voice calm and authoritative. He explained that under state law, adultery is a significant factor in divorce proceedings. As the wronged party, I was entitled to a more favorable division of assets. Derek's claim that I had not contributed to our marriage was irrelevant when he had violated our vows so thoroughly. Derek tried to recover, claiming the photos were fake, digitally manipulated. But his voice shook and his eyes kept darting to Megan, who had gone very pale. The lie was transparent, and everyone in the room knew it. Before he could say anything else, I removed the second folder. Inside were the documents proving that I was the sole legal owner of our house. The deed, the bank paperwork, every piece of evidence demonstrating that the property belonged to me and me alone. I watched Derek's expression shift from confusion to disbelief to something approaching fear. I explained what had happened 3 years ago, how I had saved our home when he nearly lost it through negligence, how I had taken steps to protect myself even then. The house he thought he was selling belonged to me. It had always belonged to me. Derek sputtered something about not knowing, about never being told. But his ignorance was his own fault. He had signed every document I put in front of him without reading a single page. His carelessness had been his undoing. Mr. Thompson explained the legal implications. Derek's attempt to sell property he did not own constituted fraud. The potential buyer could sue him. The real estate agents could take action. Derek was looking at serious legal consequences before we even got to the divorce. The room fell silent. Derek sat frozen. His earlier confidence shattered into pieces around him. Megan stared at him with an expression I recognized. It was the look of someone realizing they had backed the wrong horse, that the man they had pinned their hopes on was not who he pretended to be. I was not finished. There was one more folder, the one that held the most devastating evidence of all. I placed it on the table and opened it slowly, giving Derek time to appreciate what was coming. Inside were bank statements, invoices, transaction records. Every piece of documentation I had gathered about Derek's embezzlement scheme was laid out in meticulous detail. The fake vendors, the phantom services, the steady stream of company money flowing into his secret account. Years of theft, documented and undeniable. Derek's face went from white to grey. He looked like a man watching his entire world collapse, which of course he was. His hands trembled as he picked up one of the documents, staring at it like he could not comprehend what he was seeing. I told him that if his company discovered what he had done, he would lose more than his job. He would face criminal charges, potentially prison time. Everything he had worked for, every bit of status and success he had accumulated, would be destroyed. His career, his reputation, his freedom, all of it could vanish with a single phone call. Megan stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. She looked at Derek with disgust, her fantasy of their future together evaporating before her eyes. Without a word, she headed for the door. Derek called after her, begging her to stay, but she did not even glance back. The door closed behind her with a sound that seemed final. Derek turned back to me, desperate now. He asked what I wanted, what it would take to make this all go away. His arrogance had completely evaporated, replaced by fear and desperation. This was not the man who had called me 3 days ago laughing about destroying my life. This was someone who had finally realized he was not as clever as he thought. I looked at him for a long moment, remembering the man I had fallen in love with 12 years ago. That man was gone, replaced by someone I did not recognize. But I was not interested in revenge. I was not trying to destroy him. I simply wanted what I deserved, what I had earned through 10 years of partnership that he had thrown away. I laid out my conditions clearly. First, he would sign divorce papers of my drafting, not his. The terms would be fair but firm. Second, he would acknowledge his adultery in the legal documents, accepting full responsibility for the end of our marriage. Third, he would transfer every dollar he had stolen into an account I controlled to be disposed of as I saw fit. Fourth, he would agree to have no further contact with me after the divorce was finalized. No calls, no messages, no attempts to reconnect. In exchange, I would not report his embezzlement to his company. I would not press charges for his attempted fraud with the house. I would let him walk away with his freedom intact, which was more mercy than he deserved. Derek had no leverage left, no options remaining. He sat in silence for a long moment, processing the complete reversal of his situation. Then, without meeting my eyes, he nodded. Mr. Thompson produced the documents I had prepared, page after page of legal terms that protected my interests and held Derek accountable. Derek signed each one mechanically, his hand moving across the paper like it belonged to someone else. The signatures were shaky, barely legible, but they were valid. When the last page was signed, Mr. Thompson gathered everything and confirmed that the divorce would be processed expeditiously. Within weeks, I would be legally free of the man who had betrayed me in every possible way. I stood up and gathered my things. Looking down at Derek, still slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon, I felt an unexpected wave of sadness. Not for him, but for the years I had lost the dreams I had invested in a future that never existed. But sadness was not the same as regret. I had learned something valuable about myself through this experience, something that would stay with me long after Derek faded into memory. I told him that I had truly loved him once, that I had believed in our life together with my whole heart. I said I hoped he would learn from this, that maybe someday he would understand what he threw away. Then I walked out of that office with my head held high, leaving Derek alone with the ruins of his schemes. I made it to my car before the tears came. Sitting behind the wheel, I let myself cry for the first time since Linda had shown me those photographs. I cried for the girl who had trusted so completely, for the woman who had given so much of herself to someone unworthy. I cried for the death of a marriage that had been over long before either of us acknowledged it. But mixed with the tears was something else, something that felt like relief. The weight I had been carrying for months, the constant anxiety and suspicion, lifted from my shoulders. I did not have to wonder anymore, did not have to pretend everything was fine. The truth was out, and I had faced it on my own terms. The weeks following that meeting were both the hardest and most liberating of my life. The divorce was finalized within a month, the process accelerated by Derek's complete cooperation with every demand. He had no choice but to comply, given the evidence hanging over his head like a sword. I stayed in the house at first, surrounded by memories I was not ready to release. Every room held echoes of the life I had thought we were building together. The kitchen where we had cooked meals. The living room where we had watched movies on quiet evenings. The bedroom where I had lain awake, wondering if my husband was telling the truth. Some nights I wandered through those spaces like a ghost, touching furniture and walls, as if trying to connect with a past that no longer existed. My mother came to stay with me during those first difficult weeks. Sandra had always been my rock, steady and supportive, even when she disagreed with my choices. She cooked meals I could barely eat, sat with me through sleepless nights, held me when the grief became overwhelming. Her presence reminded me that I was not alone, that I had people who loved me, regardless of what Derek had done. Rachel visited frequently, bringing wine and conversation, and the kind of honest friendship that helps you see yourself clearly. She never said "I told you so," never suggested she had seen the warning signs I had missed. Instead, she focused on what came next, gently pushing me to think about my future. rather than dwelling in my past. Slowly, I began to emerge from the fog of divorce. I started eating properly again, sleeping through the night, finding moments of peace amid the residual pain. The tears came less frequently, replaced by a growing sense of possibility. My life had been shattered, but shattered. Things can be rebuilt into new forms. 3 months after the divorce was final, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I went back to work. For years, I had set aside my career to support Derek's ambitions, believing that his success was our success. Now I understood that I had been diminishing myself, hiding talents and skills that deserved expression. I updated my resume, enrolled in courses to refresh my accounting knowledge, and began applying for positions at firms throughout the city. The job market was competitive, but my experience and credentials were solid. After several interviews, I received an offer from a respected auditing company, a position that valued my expertise and offered room for growth. Walking into that office on my first day felt like stepping into a new life. My colleagues were welcoming, the work was engaging, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was using my mind for something meaningful. The challenges of learning new systems and meeting new people kept me focused on the present rather than the past. I started taking care of my health in ways I had neglected during my marriage. I joined a gym not to change my appearance, but to feel strong in my own body. I signed up for a book club, rediscovering my love of reading that had faded during years of catering to Derek's preferences. I made new friends, people who knew nothing of my past, and accepted me simply for who I was now. After much deliberation, I decided to sell the house. It was a difficult choice, complicated by all the memories those walls contained. But I realized I was holding on to a symbol of a life that no longer existed. The house was not my future. It was an anchor tying me to a past I needed to release. The sale brought more money than I expected, the neighborhood having appreciated significantly since we first purchased the property. Combined with the funds Derek had been forced to return, I had enough for a fresh start. I bought a smaller apartment in a different part of the city, a clean space with no history, no ghosts lurking in corners. I donated a significant portion of the money to an organization that supports women escaping domestic abuse. It felt right to transform something tainted by betrayal into something that might help others find their own path to freedom. The amount was enough to make a real difference, funding counseling services and legal assistance for women who had been trapped in situations far worse than mine. 1 year after Derek's phone call shattered my world, I sat in my new apartment and took stock of where I had landed. I was stronger than I had ever been, more confident in my own abilities and worth. My career was flourishing. My friendships were deepening. And I had discovered reserves of resilience I never knew I possessed. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Derek's life had not fared as well. His company eventually discovered other irregularities in his work, discrepancies that led to his termination. Whether they ever connected the dots to his embezzlement, I do not know. Megan had long since moved on to other prospects, leaving him alone to face the consequences of his choices. I did not take satisfaction in his misfortune. Revenge had never been my goal. I simply wanted to protect myself and claim what I had earned through years of partnership that he had violated. His struggles were his own, the natural result of a life built on deception and selfishness. Everyone eventually faces the bill for their choices. The experience taught me lessons I carry with me every day. I learned never to lose myself in another person, no matter how much I love them. I learned that my worth is not determined by someone else's treatment of me. I learned that knowledge is power, that understanding your own finances and legal rights can be the difference between victimhood and victory. Most importantly, I learned about forgiveness. Not the kind that excuses wrongdoing or pretends hurt never happened, but the kind that sets you free from carrying anger and resentment. Holding on to hatred would only poison my own life, keeping me tied to Derek long after our legal bonds were severed. So I chose to let go, not for his sake, but for mine. If you are watching this and you see pieces of your own story in mine, I want you to know something important. You are stronger than you realize. The people who underestimate you, who think they can treat you like you do not matter, they are wrong. Your silence is not weakness. Your patience is not naivety. Sometimes the quietest people are simply waiting for the right moment to speak. Life does not always give us fairness, but we can create our own justice. We can stand up for ourselves, protect our interests, and walk away from situations that diminish us. We can rebuild after devastation, finding new purposes and new joys we never imagined possible. I am grateful for where I am today, even though the path that brought me here was painful. The woman I have become is someone I am proud of, someone my grandmother would have been proud to know. And that is worth more than any marriage that required me to be less than I am. Thank you for listening to my story. If it resonated with you, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a moment when someone underestimated you, only to discover you were stronger than they imagined? What helped you find your own power? If this story touched your heart or made you think, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it today. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges and finding their way through. I wish you courage, clarity, and the wisdom to know your own worth. No matter what storms you face, remember that the sky always clears eventually. And when it does, you will still be standing.